And yeah, this is just a roadmap for the talk. So in section one, I motivate the need for an investigation of a causal claim. And two, use a framework found in feminist literature on pornography to characterize a sensible rendition of the sensible articulation of a causal claim, showing that the current evidence claims to support the view that rap causes violence is unlike the evidence necessary to support this view. And then three, I argue that restricting drillers on the basis of this is unjustified. And four, argues that critics advancing the causal claim should be worried about its racist public meaning. So section one, kind of motivating the need for this investigation. In 2018, violent crime, including knife crime in England and Wales, was significantly according to the BBC. This was followed by a media panic, which often positioned drill rappers as a cause of this rising violence. And this incentivized the lead of the Metropolitan Police at the time, Cressida Dick, the lead, to petition YouTube to remove videos, with around 30 videos being removed, and some drill artists being blocked from uploading. To date, at least 1,636 videos have been removed, as Will Pritchard explains in 2023. So one of the Met's justifications for this practice of removal is that it removes content which covers information on gang violence and murders, which could lead to further retaliatory violence. So they are concerned with how drill lyrics and videos describe stabbings and taunting rivals can raise the risk of gang violence. In the Freedom of Information request, the Met, asking the Met to provide details about flagging to social media and music streaming companies, drill videos for removal. The Met claimed that Met asked social media platforms to take robust and rapid approach to remove content which is flagged as being harmful, i.e. likely to provoke or cause real-life violence. So I think in order to establish whether restrictions based on a causal claim are justified, critics have at least two tasks. First, they must provide evidence that rap music causes violence, to call this the evidentiary burden. And second, they must show that restricting rappers' freedoms is justified on the basis of this evidence, so call this a justificatory burden. And next, and we explore both burdens and argue that both haven't been met. So I think philosophy can provide important frameworks for clarifying the precise terms in which the causal claim is framed, so cause and harm or violence. And I think there's an extensive literature in exploring whether pornography causes harm, and within this literature, we find frameworks that make sense of what cause and harm kind of mean. I find the framework of Anne Eaton particularly helpful. So I'm going to set Anne Eaton's claims and show the relevance to debates about rap causing violence. So Eaton theorizes cause in a non-deterministic way. She draws from methods using epidemiology, our current best science of causes, to present a probabilistic account of causation, the process by which pornography may shape attitudes and may lead to behavior can be specified by drawing an analogy with smoking. So smoking does not cause cancer in a deterministic sense, but many smokers do not develop lung cancer. But smoking it's still not necessary nor sufficient to develop lung cancer. And according to this notion of causation, X is a cause of Y, if and only if X occurs earlier than Y, and the probability of the occurrence of Y is greater than the occurrence of X, than the probability of the occurrence of Y given not X. So with this notion of causation in mind, I apply Eaton's further suggestions of what a sensible rendition of the claim that pornography causes harm to the causal claim about rap. So yeah, very, very content heavy, I apologize. But a sensible rendition of the causal claim about rap causing violence would do the following things. So R1, rap music can be said to cause violent attitudes or behaviors if and only if the probability of offline retaliatory violence in gang-associated youth is greater given the consumption of violent, antagonizing rap music than the probability of exhibiting violent attitudes and behaviors if violent rap is not consumed. R2, a sensible rendition of the causal claim about rap would emphasize that violent effects of rap music, so youth violence allegedly, are a cumulative effect of several factors in a complex causal mechanism. So poverty, inequality, adverse childhood experiences will lead to youth violence. R3, the causal claim about rap should be seen as pertaining to rap with antagonizing messages towards rival gangs. So the police, I think, are primarily worried about drill rap. So the police believe drill rap constitutes a form of coded communication between gangs and antagonisms raise probability of retaliatory offline violence. I don't think it should be a critique of rap as a genre, since there's a lot of non-violent rap, gospel rap. And there is no reason to think that non-violent rap would cause violent attitudes and behaviors. Therefore, if the causal connection, if there is a causal connection, it will be implicated in a complex feedback loop. So violent rap is the result of violence in communities and nations more broadly, but it also facilitates violence in nations and communities more broadly. 5, a sensible rendition makes clear exactly the violent harms and effects critics are worried about. So when law enforcement blame drill rap for violence, they are not worried about how rap might raise probability of violence in the general population, but rather about retaliatory violence in gang-associated individuals. And R6, sensible rendition of causal claim about rap causing violence is cautious and not necessarily in favor of state intervention. So how might we verify the causal claim in the sense specified here? I think there are important recommendations in Eaton's framework which can illuminate how an anti-rap critic might verify this sensible rendition of the causal claim. So Eaton suggests anti-pornography feminists would do well to verify the harm hypothesis by employing epidemiological methods. So epidemiologists use clinical trials, ecological studies, case control, and cohort studies to determine whether there is a strong positive association between, for instance, smoking and cancer. For example, case control study compares the smoking histories of 2 groups, one with lung cancer and one without lung cancer, and cohort studies compare smokers with non-smokers, determining the rate of lung cancer in each group. To my knowledge, no studies looking to establish the causal claim about rap have employed clinical trials, ecological studies, or case control and cohort studies. But even if we do suppose that these studies a meaningful correlation between drill rap and violence can be demonstrated through these studies, I think we still need to do more to establish the causal relation. So yeah, epidemiologists standardly appeal to 6 criteria to determine whether a correlation is causal with respect to disease. So yeah, I'm just gonna lay out these 6 criteria and what they look like regarding rap. So temporality, consuming rap must precede the violent effects as the first condition of the sensible rendition of the causal claim makes clear. And that would mean a video taunting another gang would have to have been released before the alleged offline retaliatory response. Strength of replication, so studies investigating the correlation between rap music and violent behaviors. The attitudes in gang-associated youth must provide strong correlations that replicate. Onto those relationship, increasing the duration, total exposure, intensity, and level of taunts, threats, and antagonisms increase the likelihood of violent attitudes and behaviors in gang-associated youth. Plausibility, should a correlation between violent rap and music and violent effects be found, it should be explainable by our best hypotheses. And there should be a consideration of alternative explanation. So investigators must take alternative causes for violent effects into account. For instance, if have investigators looked at causes other than drill rap music as an explanation for violent attitudes and behaviors, such as location becoming revealed or known. As association data, if rap music is a causal factor of violent effects, the risk of violent effects should decrease with a decrease in the consumption of rap. For instance, if rap music is a causal factor of offline retaliatory violence, the risk of offline retaliatory violence should decrease with a decrease in gang-associated youth consumption of rap. So Eaton admits that anti-pornography feminists are far from providing evidence of harm hypothesis or that pornography causes harms in the ways that she talks about that meets these criteria. And similarly, as I show in the next subsection, evidence kind of claiming to support the causal claim has yet to meet these criteria. So I think there are at least 2 sets of literature the police might employ for evidence of causal claim. One set of studies looks at how rap produces copycat violence by looking at the general effects of rap music on general audiences. And the second set of studies could look at how adherence to the code of the street causes retaliatory violence and gang-associated youth, and look at each in turn. So yeah, first set is general effects of rap on violent attitudes and behaviors. So I think the most rigorous analysis of the literature on rap music's alleged violent effects was conducted by Kuban and Weitzer in 2010. And they found that many of the studies on rap's effects are non-empirical. So many authors theorize about rap's effects on identity, political inclinations, attitudes and behaviors, but they base writings on anecdotal evidence and selective quotations. They also identified some writings as kind of quasi-empirical, so these cases differ from non-empirical cases insofar as there is some data to support the points of the authors, but the methodological kind of limitations are severe. They also identify some studies that use empirical data to back up their conclusions. However, these studies are hard to come by and often conclude that the relationship between rap and violent behaviors and attitudes is complex rather than concluding that listening to rap promotes violence. And even say that even natural and ethnographic studies yet to demonstrate a link between violent and rap and violent effects. So yeah, Nehru and Hunter's ethnographic research, for instance, shows that consumers of rap interpret rap in various ways and critically engage with the genre. There's more of a recent studies have found that exposure to violently themed music does not cause real world violence for increasing violent behaviors and attitudes. And others have found that this kind of music can give fans a range of positive psychological functions. So I think these studies, coupled with the inadequacy of studies at the general effects of rap on general audiences, show that causal claim is far from being established. Moreover, however, as the sensible rendition of the causal claim highlights, the violence the police are concerned with is offline retaliatory violence, where drill music constitutes a form of coded communication between gangs, and antagonisms raise the probability of retaliatory offline violence. They're not really concerned with how listening to rap music with violent themes and messages might precipitate copycat crime. So I don't know if you can really know whether antagonisms in drill raise the probability of retaliatory violence in gang-associated youth based on studies looking at the general effects of rap. So given this, proponents of the causal claim might build a different set of evidence, and this is what I turn to next. So proponents of the causal claim might argue that drill music raises the probability of retaliatory gang violence by appealing to literature supporting the view that gang-associated youth use social media to taunt rivals and trade insults in ways that cause offline gang retaliation. By using code of the street as theory, researchers claim that insults occurring in online spaces raise the probability of offline retaliatory violence. And the basic premise of this code, as developed by Elijah Anderson, is that gang-associated youth adhere to a street code which revolves around the display of a predisposition to violence and is capable of retaliatory violence. So as a result of growing fears about digitally mediated gang violence, researchers have written extensively, almost exploratory articles about how gang-associated youth transfer code of the street directly to social media. So Stewart argues that the existing scholarship is based on a theory of parallelism, so where online activity mirrors offline activity, since the same gang violence mechanisms on the urban street unfold offline, according to certain theorists. But I think Stewart's extensive ethnographic work shows that assuming a sort of parallelism or direct positive or causal relationship between social media use and physical retaliation overlooks important opportunities for youth to de-escalate and avoid offline gang violence. Moreover, arguing that online interactions mirror offline interactions neglects how offline conflicts are formed by social media. Moreover, studies claiming to support the parallelism thesis are severely logically limited, as Stewart claims. Previous studies rely primarily on self-report surveys and/or content analyses of disembodied social media posts. Posts several years after their creation, often asking people other than gang-associated youth to interpret the meanings and motivations of a given piece on social media content. I think that most of these studies provide anecdotal evidence that a piece of online content may have preceded an increase of offline violence. But to say something meaningful about drill, we need more than anecdotal evidence of an increase of violence. We need a more in-depth analysis. I think Stewart kind of provides this more in-depth analysis. So, his ethnographic research into Southside Chicago's urban youth saw him develop a relationship with gang-associated youth. He recruited 60 young men from allied gang factions and he obtained formal consent to shadow participants throughout their daily activities, spending 20 to 50 hours a week directly observing participants and taking field notes after leaving the field. He would expand his notes and supplement his observations with interviews on audio recorders. Crucially, he found that gang-associated youth engage in online antagonisms as part of an innovative, intentional effort to build violent reputations without the necessity of behaving violently offline. So Stewart calls upon researchers to do better by way of providing evidence of the role of that online antagonisms can play on offline retaliatory behavior, since there exists no systematic data or definitive analysis to determine the precise causal relationship between social media and offline violence. But as we have seen, I think the existing evidence Joel critics can appeal to establish the causal claim is riddled with problems, and evidence in favour of the view that rap causes offline retaliatory violence and looks nothing like the studies needed to show a causal relationship between drill rap music and violence that the Met are concerned with. If through case control studies, cohort studies, and ecologic studies, a meaningful relationship between rap music and violent retaliatory attitudes and behaviours can be found, proponents of the causal claim would do well to adopt D6 criteria to show that rap music causes these violent retaliatory effects, and the evidence in this section seems to be insufficient to provide support for the claims R1 through R6. Sorry, I've got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We started a bit later, so if you have 5 minutes from now, then we'll be on time.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'm just gonna whiz through this then. So I think so I've spent some time on what a causal claim might look like and the insufficiency of existing evidence to establish any such causal connection. And now more briefly turn to the issue of whether censorship is a legitimate intervention or a justificatory burden. So according to this sensible rendition of the causal claim, to the extent there is an empirical relationship between rap and violence, as yet unsubstantiated, it will be a complex picture in which drill music is just kind of one causal factor amongst many. And in this section, I'm going to argue that this intervention of censoring drill is not justified. So I think the first reason why the censorship intervention would not be justified is that public health approaches have been shown by evidence to be more effective. The public health approach suggests policymakers should search for a cure by using scientific evidence to identify what causes and develop testing kind of interventions. So UK have gained great success with such an approach to reducing gang violence in Glasgow and Strathclyde. For instance, Operation Reclaim the Phoenix, which focused on reopening sports and recreational areas to provide safe and supervised educational, recreational and diversionary activities, helped to diminish gang violence by up to 70%. Before a public health approach was taken to violence in Strathclyde, had one of the largest or highest rates of knife crime in the world. So whilst there has been success of taking a public health approach to gang violence and knife crime in Glasgow, in places like London, the public health approach is seriously lacking. So the World Health Organization noted that strategies to reduce violence in places like London are not based in research, but primarily consist of police-led interventionist approaches. And this is reflected in the censorious interventions targeting drill. So instead of doing the work to show that drill causes violence, in the sense specified above, the police kind of assuming there's this causal connection and then basing interventions on this assumption. The second reason why censorship-oriented approaches are unjustified is that violence prevention strategies must be community-informed. So interventions must be consistent with what those within the community see as causing violence, and should uplift the community by taking a community-building approach over police-led interventions. So being community-informed is important in selecting intervention because it brings about factors like consent, and also because it seems epistemically best, since it factors in what communities think will work best for them. So censoring and restricting drillers' freedoms requires considerable resources in the form of policing, surveillance, and court proceedings. And this takes resources away from community building approaches, which, there's evidence shown that this is more effective, such as opportunities for recreation and clubs for the youth. And drillers, they're aware of the actual causes of serious youth violence, as evidenced by Abracadabra here. And part of the community building approach should survey the potential benefits the community gains from participating in drill music for young black boys who have spent their lives kind of demonized, being told they contribute negatively to society. They get attention from fans and corporations, which amounts to the effect of being told, hey, you're special, unique, and worth being paid attention to. And this humanizes the young men in ways that are often not expressed. So yeah, I think police unable to justify censorship oriented approaches to drill, restrictions based on drill are neither informed by evidence nor informed by community, and it seems highly prejudicial that law enforcement resume in on music censorship as an intervention, as opposed to say tackling poverty. And I think this justificatory burden becomes even more untenable when we think about racist social meaning of such interventions. And I've got 2 minutes. Right? So, okay, cool. I'm just gonna sketch over this. It's pretty brief. It's brief. 2 sides. So the causal claim, as we saw, lacks robust empirical support, yet it's a prevalent critique of rap music. And since causal claim is empirically unsubstantiated and robust empirical evidence is required, we might be left wondering why it's made so often and with such force. I think there are some studies suggesting that these claims are caused by racist attitudes themselves. However, I want to leave open what might cause such critique for further investigation, and I instead argue that such critiques have a racist public meaning. So I think even in the absence of problematic anti-Black attitudes and intentions by, say, the police, critiques of rappers causing violence might entrench anti-Blackness when we explore the public meaning of an expression. So the public meaning is the meaning that others can justifiably attribute to our acts given the context in which we perform them. The key issue with prejudicial public meaning is that it sends a prejudicial message or reinforces prejudicial stereotypes. For instance, Archer and Matheson give the following example. Say a man was to interrupt a woman in an important business meeting. In a business culture that's patriarchal, it seems reasonable to understand this interruption as expressing sexism, denigration of women, regardless of what the attitudes and intentions of the person are. And I think the problem here is that actions reinforce sexism. And crucially, the interruption can have a sexist public meaning, even if it lacks intentional and attitudinal meaning that it's sexist. So I think we could similarly kind of apply this to critiques of rap music. So public proclamations of the causal claim can express a racist public meaning, regardless of police's intention and attitudes. And one of these racist public meanings here is that Black music is dangerous, and this serves to reinforce stereotypes about Black art's lack of sophistication. And the public context in which that gives rise to such public meanings is prior hyper scrutiny of Black art forms. I think another racist public meaning here is that young Black men are dangerous, and this serves to reinforce stereotypes about Black male criminality in public context that gives rise to such public meanings and prior existence of stereotypes about Black criminality. I would go into that, but I don't think I have time. But yeah, that number side, yeah, right there. Yeah. So as I think we've seen, there is, I think, a justificatory burden to show that censorship rather than other interventions is the most effective, and this burden has not yet been met. And in that context, there is also a social meaning attached to censorship approaches that is legitimate to surveil Black youth, even when there is no evidence to support such surveillance, and such surveillance is effective or fair. And yeah, to conclude, I've argued that there are multiple reasons against making the causal claim and drawing interventionary policy from it. First, given the complex, complicated empirical evidence and standards of empirical evidence required to establish a causal claim, there is insufficient evidence to support this claim. Second, the censorship-oriented approaches to new crime that law enforcement taken is unjustified. The causal claim and the most charitable interpretation of it, and potentially damaging because it risks not reducing the violence in the most effective way. And third, both the causal claim and interventionist censorship approaches in response are particularly problematic given their damaging social meanings. So I think given what's at stake, police critics need to do better both in establishing the causes of violence and formulating responses to address it,